Hey guys, today we slip beneath the surface, down where the light fractures into hazy ribbons, and the world you know becomes something alien. You hover just above a yawning black mouth in the seafloor, an opening so deep that your dive computer practically sighs in resignation. You feel your chest tighten. The water is colder here, the pressure wrapping around you like an impatient boa constrictor. And in that moment, you know, if anything goes wrong, you're just another footnote in someone's obscure marine biology paper. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments, because somehow it's always more fun knowing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're floating over what scientists poetically call a blue hole, though aquatic void of certain doom feels closer to the mark. These sinkholes didn't just appear overnight. Their birth story stretches back tens of thousands of years, to a time when sea lay sea. The final thing rise in one fine light. Is air a safe?
Imagine Florida during the Ice Age, a wide, dry plain where early humans hunted mammoths, and massive limestone caves stretched like arteries beneath the earth. Over time, some of those caves collapsed, leaving vertical shafts that would later be swallowed by the iron-white plains and a fine, dark field.
That's how these underwater portals came to be. Silent remnants of a time when the coastline looked nothing like it does today. You kick your fins and drift closer to the edge. The water seems to pulse, dark and magnetic. Somewhere down there, sediment tells a quiet story. Layer upon layer of ancient dust, pollen, and microfossils, recording millennia of changing climates. Historians still argue whether early coastal communities may have encountered these sinkholes while they were still dry, perhaps even using them as freshwater sources. Imagine stumbling upon a perfectly round pool, its surface still and black, like a mirror to nowhere. You toss in a pebble, hear the distant echo, and probably assume it was cursed. Because, really, wouldn't you? Geology, of course, doesn't care about curses. It cares about chemistry, and pressure, and time. Limestone dissolves easily in slightly acidic groundwater, and over thousands of years, those caves expanded until their ceilings couldn't hold. Collapse, erosion, rinse, repeat, and you've got yourself a hole that could swallow a skyscraper. One of the largest known blue holes, the Great Blue Hole of Belize, spans over 300 meters across and drops more than 120 meters down. It's a geological scar, a reminder that Earth is always reshaping itself, whether we're watching or not. You remember that bit from a documentary about early divers exploring these places in the 1970s, back when scuba tanks were clunky and underwater flashlights barely worked. They'd lower themselves into the darkness, fins brushing against jagged limestone edges, not entirely sure if they'd find an exit or an underwater chamber that would become their tomb. And still, they went. Humans are stubborn like that. We just have to see what's inside. I am the question of the tomb. As you imagine those first explorers, you can almost hear the crackle of static in their headsets, the hum of a boat engine somewhere far above. There's something comforting about that. The idea that even in alien environments, there's always a tether to the familiar. You glance down again, trying to picture what lies below. Spiral corridors of stone, maybe a trapped pocket of air untouched for millennia, or the skeletal remains of some unlucky creature that wandered too close. Fringe theories love these places too. You've probably seen those viral posts claiming that blue holes are portals to other dimensions, or that ancient civilizations used them as sacrificial pits. It's easy to see why. The geometry alone feels unnatural, too precise for an accident of nature. And while geologists roll their eyes, even some scientists admit these places hold mysteries we've barely begun to unravel. But here's the thing. Every layer of rock, every mineral deposit, every fossil fragment is a breadcrumb in in Earth's diary. By studying the chemistry locked in those sediments, researchers can trace past hurricanes, drought cycles, even massive volcanic events. It's like time travel without the paradoxes or terrible haircuts. That quiet mud at the bottom of a sinkhole, it's a library, and we're just learning how to read it. You take another deep breath, well, as deep as you can with the regulator jammed in your mouth, and glance at your pressure gauge. Plenty of air left. You're not ready to ascend, not yet, because the deeper you look, the more you realize these holes aren't just geological quirks. They're archives, reliquaries, maybe even cautionary tales. And as the shadows stretch below, you can't shake the sense that you're trespassing in a place that doesn't entirely belong to you. Your dive buddy gestures, signaling to descend. The rope line dips into the abyss, disappearing after a few meters. You hesitate, then follow, equalizing your ears as the world you fade off. The walls narrow, the temperature drops another degree, and the light dims to a dusky blue. You can feel it now, that ancient, patient call of the earth. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought whispers, what if we've barely scratched the surface of what these places are trying to tell us? The rope slides through your gloved fingers as you drift deeper, the hiss of your regulator the only steady sound. Light fades until it feels like twilight, even though it's barely past noon on the surface. Your dive light cuts a narrow path through the gloom, and that's when you see it, the first hint of life clicking to the rough limestone walls. Tiny shrimp, nearly transparent, dart into cracks at the edge of your beam. Bizarre little worms, the kind that look like props from a low-budget alien movie, wiggle in the slow current. This isn't the ocean you know from postcards and Instagram reels. This is a quiet, alien world where evolution has gone off script. You hover, almost motionless, careful not to disturb the fine sediment that coats everything down here like moon dust. The water tastes different too, more metallic. That's because these blue holes often trap layers of water with drastically different chemistries. The top layer is oxygen-rich and relatively fresh. Below that, a heavy saline layer often reeks faintly of sulfur, like overcooked eggs. Beneath that, anoxic darkness where almost nothing familiar survives. Scientists call these layers stratified, but you just think of them as planetary borders. Thin, invisible lines dividing entire ecosystems stacked on top of one another. And yet, life thrives here, or at least it endures. You spot a strange, pale crab shuffling sideways along a ledge. It's blind, a relic of adaptation to perpetual darkness. Somewhere farther below, microbial mats shimmer faintly, their colors shifting with your beam. These mats are ancient, descendants of some of the earliest life forms on Earth, the same kinds of microbes that helped shape the planet's atmosphere billions of years ago. If that doesn't make you pause, nothing will. Historians still argue whether these microbial communities could be analogs for extraterrestrial life, proof that, under the right conditions, even a hostile environment can support something. NASA scientists, for instance, have studied blue holes as models for what life might look like on Europa or Enceladus, icy moons with hidden oceans. So, here you are, 100 feet below sea level, technically floating in a stand-in for alien research. You drift lower, careful not to kick up the sediment. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Your dive light reveals wisps of milky hyphen-white bacterial blooms, twisting like ghostly curtains. These bacteria metabolize sulfur instead of oxygen, which to you sounds like a death wish, but to them is just breakfast. They form intricate colonies, sprawling mats that feed entire food chains in this otherwise barren space. And yet, everything feels fragile, as though one wrong fin kick could erase thousands of years of careful equilibrium. Then there are the fish, if you can call them that. Some are small, eel-like creatures, perfectly adapted to the darkness, with skin that looks almost translucent. Others are more unsettling. Sluggish predators with oversized jaws and eyes that reflect your light in cold, glassy pinpoints. You remind yourself they're harmless, probably more afraid of you than you are of them, though that's a hard sell when one of them glides a little too close for comfort. Quirky tidbit: some divers swear they've seen creatures that shouldn't be there. Fish species thought to be extinct, or organisms that don't match any known catalog. Of course, marine biologists roll their eyes at these stories, but then again, we've only explored a fraction of the world's oceans. Who's to say some prehistoric holdover isn't lurking down here, perfectly happy in its forgotten sanctuary? You steady yourself against the wall, staring at a streak of mineral deposits. It's a reminder that these holes aren't just biological sanctuaries, they're chemical factories, constantly shifting as groundwater seeps in and mixes with seawater. Samples pulled from these depths reveal nutrient profiles that help explain how coastal ecosystems function, why certain reefs thrive, why others collapse. The irony isn't lost on you. The health of vibrant, sunlit reefs might depend on the chemistry of these dark, hidden caverns. The silence is hypnotic. Down here, sound doesn't travel the way it does on the surface. Your thoughts feel louder, more immediate. You imagine the countless centuries that have passed while this place sat unchanged. Long before humans drew maps or carved myths, these sinkholes were here, quietly hosting their micro-universes, indifferent to everything above. And yet, for all its stillness, this world isn't static. Every so often, storms stir the layers, currents shift, and the balance changes. Entire colonies of bacteria can collapse in a single season, only to slowly rebuild. There's a resilience to it, a reminder that life finds a way, even when the odds are impossibly steep. As you hover there, you think about the divers who didn't make it out. There are always stories. Someone who misread their depth gauge, ran out of air, or simply vanished in the labyrinthine tunnels that sometimes branch from these pits. Their bodies, if found at all, often show no sign of struggle, as if they simply drifted into the dark and never came back. It's a sobering thought, and you grip the rope a little tighter. And yet, despite the danger, people keep coming. Scientists, yes, but also thrill seekers, cave divers, and those who just can't resist the pull of the unknown. Maybe it's human nature, this urge to stare into the abyss and whisper, "What if?" Or maybe it's something simpler, a need to understand our place in a world that's always deeper and stranger than we imagine. You glance at your gauge again. The pressure is heavier now, and you know you're nearing your planned depth. Your light sweeps the cavern one last time, catching on a flicker of movement, something darting just out of view. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. Either way, you know this much. Life, in all its improbable forms, clings to these places, surviving in the cracks and crevices where logic says it shouldn't. As you begin your slow ascent, the layers change again. The water warms slightly, the metallic taste fades, and distant sunlight filters in like a promise. You break the surface, lungs aching but exhilarated. And as you strip off your mask, you can't shake the thought that you've just glimpsed a secret, one that's been waiting patiently for anyone curious, brave, or foolish enough to dive deep enough to find it. Your heartbeat slows as you float on the surface, but that quiet itch of curiosity doesn't fade. Hours later, back on shore, you find yourself staring at the map of the coastline, tracing the dots where other sinkholes lurk, each one with a name whispered like a dare. Green banana, amberjack, stargate. The stories attached to them aren't just scientific notes. They're tangled threads of myth, mystery, and human imagination. Legends cling to these places like barnacles. Fishermen in the Bahamas once swore that the blue holes were home to Lusca, a half octopus, half high-arc beast with a taste for unsuspecting swimmers. In Belize, older generations told of spirits guarding the Great Blue Hole, punishing anyone who dared to disturb their rest. And in Florida, divers still joke, half serious, half not, about hearing whispers in the water, faint hums with no obvious source. It's easy to dismiss those tales as tall stories spun over campfires. But when you're 150 feet down, with nothing but the hiss of your regulator, even the most skeptical mind can start to wonder. One quirky tidbit you'd never expect: in the early 1900s, some locals near inland sinkholes used them as impromptu trash pits, tossing everything from furniture to animal carcasses into the dark. When divers explored those same holes decades later, they found surreal underwater junkyards, complete with rusted bicycles and sun-black skeletons. Historians still argue whether those discoveries tell us more about careless habits or early beliefs that these holes were bottomless, capable of swallowing anything. But not all mysteries are folklore. Some are very real and very unresolved. The Great Blue Hole, for example, has been mapped dozens of times, yet researchers still debate its formation details. Was it a single catastrophic collapse or a series of smaller ones over millennia? And then there's the ongoing question of the missing explorers, divers who vanished without a trace. In a few cases, their equipment was found tangled in narrow side tunnels, suggesting panic or disorientation, but others remain blank spaces on the map. Historians and scientists alike still argue whether those side chambers even connect to other networks, or if they're just isolated dead ends holding their secrets forever. It's the debate that keeps the fascination alive. People want answers, and where science hesitates, speculation rushes in. Fringe theorists claim some blue holes are gateways to underground rivers that flow for miles inland, maybe even to entirely unknown cave systems. A few take it further, suggesting they're portals to inner Earth, a hollow world theory that never quite dies, no matter how much evidence says otherwise. You chuckle at that, but there's a part of you, the part still replaying caught, the darkness in your mind that doesn't entirely dismiss the allure of hidden worlds. Then there's the mystery of the sounds. Several expeditions have recorded strange acoustics deep within certain sinkholes, low-frequency hums or pulses that don't match known marine noise patterns. Some attribute it to shifting rock layers or currents creating resonance, while others predictably claim it's evidence of something other. Scientists keep collecting data, but no definitive explanation has surfaced. Maybe that's what makes these places feel so alive, the sense that no matter how much you measure, there's always something just beyond comprehension. One historical fact always lands with weight. These sinkholes were dry, accessible places during the last ice age, and there's evidence that early humans used them. In some sites, archaeologists have found ancient tools, animal bones, even human remains preserved in astonishing condition. Imagine that, standing on solid ground where, thousands of years later, you now float in full dive gear, breathing compressed air. The ground you're exploring was once walked by hunters and gatherers who probably couldn't imagine oceans rising to swallow their world. Even now, some of the sediment layers retrieved from deep cores are rewriting history. Analysis has revealed climate shifts and catastrophic events, mega droughts, volcanic winters, even sudden collapses of ice shelves that had ripple effects on human civilizations around the globe. It's humbling to think that a silent pit in the seafloor holds answers to questions that span continents and centuries. And yet, despite all that gravitas, there's still an undeniable thrill to the absurdities that pop up in these places. Like the time researchers in a Florida blue hole stumbled across a perfectly preserved alligator carcass at a depth that seemed impossible for it to have reached naturally. Or the story of the diver who swears he saw a full-grown bull shark circling silently in a sinkhole that should have been too shallow and isolated for such a which made all the right animals that created the world as a single self. And cool. Fact. Whether those tales are true or just embellished, they add to the mythology, turning these natural formations into stages where reality and imagination blur. Historians still argue whether myths like Lusca or the bottomless pits were ways of explaining natural dangers to early communities, or just cultural storytelling to keep curious kids from wandering too close. Either way, they worked. Those stories gave shape to the fear and awe that these geological oddities inspire. And if you've ever hung suspended above one of those dark mouths, even for a moment, you understand that awe is timeless. As you sit now, towel draped over your shoulders, you catch yourself scrolling through dive forums and expedition logs, soaking up every scrap of lore you can find. Someone mentions the eerie silence. Another shares a photo of unexplained light refractions deep below. One post, buried in the comments, claims there's an entire lost chamber under a well-known sinkhole that no one's been able to map fully. You know better than to take it at face value, but still, the mystery gnaws at you. Because here's the thing about blue holes. They're not just voids in the earth, they're mirrors for our curiosity. They remind you that even in a world mapped by satellites and explored by robots, there are still places where the unknown hums just out of reach. And for some of us, that hum is impossible to ignore. By the time you strap your gear back on for the next dive, the mystery has woven itself into your bones. You tell yourself it's for science, data collection, savoir cause, a neat little line in a research log, but deep down, you know the truth. You're chasing something older, something primal. The boat rocks gently on the surface as you roll back into the water, that sharp rush of cold wrapping you like an old friend. This time, you're not tentative. The line is there, steady and taut, and you let yourself sink, weightless, into the waiting dark. Humans have been obsessed with exploring these places for decades. Some do it for glory, some for knowledge, and some simply because they can't stand not knowing what's at the bottom. In the 1970s, before modern tech made safer, divers relied on primitive gear, shaky lights, and sheer stubbornness. A few never returned. Their loss, tragic as it was, didn't stop the next wave of explorers. If anything, it made the holes even more alluring. Dangerous, yes, but also romantic in that reckless human way. Modern researchers are armed with ROVs, sonar mapping, and oxygen scrubbers that make dives longer and safer, but the risks are still real. Nitrogen narcosis, equipment failure, the sheer disorientation of absolute darkness. It doesn't take much to turn a careful descent into a frantic scramble for survival. You've read the case studies, the reports written in clinical language that can't quite mask the quiet horror of those last moments. And yet, you're here, descending deeper, the hum of your rebreather keeping pace with your heartbeat. At 80 feet, you pass a narrow ledge, its surface dotted with strange white bacterial mats that ripple like silk in your light. You pause, just for a second, to collect a sample. It's mundane work, but feels sacred, like you're plucking a relic from an ancient temple. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you think of the astronauts who trained in these waters, using the weightlessness and isolation to prepare for space. Funny, isn't it, that the closest we can get to another planet might just be hiding in our own backyard? You remember reading about a diver named Sheik Exley, a pioneer of cave diving who pushed limits nobody thought possible. He mapped unexplored passages, developed safety protocols still in use today, and inspired generations of divers to follow. His legacy is etched not just in textbooks, but in the unspoken code that every serious explorer carries. Respect the water, respect the danger, and never forget that the whole doesn't care about your confidence. Historians still argue whether his final dive was a calculated risk or a tragic miscalculation, but one thing's certain, his courage left a permanent mark on this world. Deeper still, the water shifts around you, the current brushing your suit like a ghost. You feel the pressure in your ears, that dull ache that reminds you how fragile you are in this environment. And then, there it is, the bottom. Not a flat plain, but a moonscape of jagged limestone and eerie stillness. You hover there, letting the silence settle in, feeling the strange mix of triumph and humility that comes with reaching a place few humans ever have. It's easy to forget the outside world here. Deadlines, traffic, the constant noise of life. They all feel impossibly distant. Down here, it's just you, the hum of your equipment, and the quiet heartbeat of the earth itself. And in that quiet, you realize something that explorers across centuries have always known. We're drawn to the edges, not because we expect to conquer them, but because they remind us of how small and how curious we truly are. On your ascent, you trace your fingers along the wall, following the ridges and cracks that tell the story of collapse and creation. Each groove, each layer, is a chapter in a book that took millennia to write. And though you'll never read it all, you've at least learned to listen, to respect the language of stone and water, of silence and depth. Back on the boat, the world feels brighter, louder, too sharp after the soft cocoon of the deep. Someone hands you a thermos of coffee, and you sip it slowly, letting the warmth chase the chill from your bones. Around you, the crew is quiet, each person processing their own version of the experience. Some smile, some stare out to sea, and one or two jot hurried notes as if afraid the details will slip away. And maybe that's the real pull. Not the danger, not the data, but the way these dives carve something into you. You come back changed, carrying a piece of the unknown that no surface life can quite touch. It's addictive, that feeling, and you know you'll be back. Because the holes don't give up their secrets all at once. They reveal them slowly, like a story told in whispers, daring you to listen closer. As the sun dips toward the horizon, you pack your gear, already thinking about the next dive. The ocean stretches out in front of you, endless and inscrutable, and you realize that for every hole you've explored, there are dozens more waiting, each with its own history, its own ecosystem, its own quiet invitation to step into the dark. And as the boat hums back toward shore, you lean against the rail, salt spray on your face, and let the hum of the engine lull you into that liminal space between wakefulness and dream.
Well, if we had done any other way, we knew that we would take about every little week of India.
In that moment, you understand the real discovery isn't what's at the bottom of those holes, but what they awaken in you, the quiet wand.
Wonder, the restless curiosity, the reminder that no matter how much we learn, there's always more just below the surface, waiting. The waves are softer now, the sky deepening into shades of violet and gold, and you let your mind drift. The day's adrenaline ebbs, replaced by a calm so profound it feels almost sacred. The chatter around you fades into a soothing hum, the kind that lulls you into an easy quiet. You think about the depths you visited, the alien creatures, the ancient stones, and the weight of time pressing in from all sides. And you realize that's the gift these places give. Not answers, not glory, but perspective. They remind you that you're just a fleeting moment in a much longer story, a single breath in the endless tide of time.